is aware. So the first one is from Katerina Shamana and Oliver Olchin from the University of Sheffield, and their paper, How We Built Partnerships with Academic and Professional Colleagues to Provide Guidance on the Generative AI Explosion in 2023. Hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think somebody was going to share the slides for us, but if not,
yes, Delphine was sharing, wasn't she?
Yeah,
hopefully
thank you.
She's in the process.
So they were coming up, so I'll try those again. Oh, there they are, I think.
Yeah, all good.
I'm sorry, that's not our one.
Oh no, that's not. Sorry.
Don't
know what went on there.
That's the test. Can you talk about someone else's slide?
Give it a go.
Okay. Yeah, that's
great.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, so thanks for joining us today. Just to introduce ourselves, my name's Oliver and I'm one of the Science Liaison Librarians at the University of Sheffield. And I'm joined by my colleague, Katerina, who is the Information Literacy Librarian at the University of Sheffield also. So in this talk, we're going to present our reflections on how the University of Sheffield Library worked in partnership with colleagues from across our institution to create guidance to help students develop their generative AI literacy. Our talk's going to cover primarily how we work collaboratively with colleagues in other professional services departments at the university to create guidance on Gen AI at a time before we really had an institutional policy. We're also going to reflect on how emerging Gen AI technologies encouraged us to reconsider our support for information literacy and unfair means. So I imagine, like everyone else here, we spent the early part of 2023 trying to get our heads around Gen AI, what the implications of these new technologies might be for libraries and higher education more broadly. So ChatGPT and later Bard, Gemini, Copilot, and so on had the potential to disrupt more or less every aspect of what we do. And as a result, there was a huge amount of uncertainty, anxiety, and probably some excitement as well about what this would mean for learning, teaching, and research. Students, lecturers, professional services staff all wanted more information on what Gen AI was and what it could do, guidance on how to use it responsibly in their work. But at that time, there was very little consensus, either in our own institution or the sector as a whole, around what responsible use of Gen AI might look like. So we felt the library was well placed to take a lead on this, given our expertise in digital and information literacy, but we needed to ensure our guidance complemented that we knew was also being developed by our other colleagues, both in academic departments and in other professional services departments.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. So as Oliver's just said, the library's expertise in digital and information literacy has placed us, information professionals, at the forefront of providing guidance on generative AI. However, the University of Sheffield has 5 faculties, plus the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, all with different approaches to AI and generative AI, some more established than others. Think, for example, of the engineering or computer science departments. Furthermore, the university has also several professional departments, all supporting learning and teaching in different ways. And you can see the list on the slide. So we position the library support in the area of taking a critical approach to evaluate generative AI. We wanted to highlight power structures and inequalities and the different social, cultural, and political context in which generative AI originates and operates. Oliver, you are on mute.
You'll be used to it by now, wouldn't you? So from the outset, we approached our guide as part of a wider suite of Gen AI guidance being developed by colleagues across the institution. So we started by meeting with our colleagues in some of the teams that Katerina just mentioned to discuss our plans and to ensure we were taking a collaborative and coordinated approach. So we're really keen to avoid duplication and to share different perspectives, knowledge and expertise that we might have. From these conversations, we decided to develop the library's guidance on Gen AI from a critical thinking and information literacy perspective. And from the other talks we've seen today, that seems to be a common theme across the sector. So much of our existing support and teaching centered around helping students to develop their skills in comparing, questioning and evaluating sources of information. So this felt like a logical extension of that. We wanted to help empower students to take a kind of responsible and critical approach to using Gen AI in their work. And we started from the position that Gen AI can be really useful and positive, but only if you understand its limitations, such as its tendency to hallucinate incomplete or misleading information sometimes, issues of bias, plagiarism, as well as privacy and environmental concerns. So our guidance aims to help students use Gen AI in a responsible way that assists rather than replaces their own voices, ideas or learning. And we felt this approach would complement rather than compete with the wider framework of university guidance being developed by our colleagues in other university departments, which tended to focus primarily on assessment, avoiding unfair means of plagiarism, as well as using Gen AI to help with writing, grammar, comprehension and coding, things like that. So I was taking more of a critical literacy sort of approach. So when researching and drafting our guidance, we shared our work with colleagues across our institution, including the Deputy Vice President for Education, Head of Academic Programmes Office, as well as academics in other departments such as the Information School, because we wanted their comments and input, and we made sure we incorporated those into our guide. This led to some interesting discussions and allowed us to take on board a range of perspectives and opinions.
And here it is, the results. This is the guide. You got the URL on the slide if you want to have a look at it later. Two key points I would like to highlight, however, now. The first is we were keen to distinguish between AI and generative AI. We wanted our messages to be specific, precise, and accurate. You know, there is already loads of sweeping and inaccurate information on AI and generative AI, and we didn't want to add to it. The second point is that we rejected the idea that generative AI could be referenced. We took the lead from our library director that generative AI tools cannot be credited as authors and therefore cannot be referenced. From an ethical perspective, generative AI lacks the originality of thought that distinguishes human creativity and scholarly endeavor. So we advise to acknowledge any use of generative AI tools via 3 steps, which are acknowledge, describe, and evidence. So this was specifically co-devised with the University Academic Skills Center. Thank you, Oliver. So as Oliver said, the Library Generative AI Guide complements the other university guidance, all with different angles and aimed at different audiences. And you got the links in on the slide for your reference. So we have had a suite of library guides for years, but this is our most viewed guide ever, with more than 22,000 views since it was published in September last year, with a peak of more than 2,000 views in one day. The collaboration within the library and wider within the university also continued when we devised a unified comms plan. All university guidance was launched at the same time via an all staff and student email from the Vice President for Education. This was thanks to the liaising and networking by one of our library colleagues. Hence, we got an acknowledgement slide further on with all the names of the colleagues which helped to make the guide a success. So what next? So the collaboration established is still continuing. Generative AI is also continuously changing. We are in the process of consulting students to gain a deep understanding of how generative AI is being used in practice. This is led by our information school. We are having ongoing conversations with students and other professional services to ensure the guidance is up to date, cohesive, and appropriate. We are working on practical guidance for students on using AI and generative AI to help find reliable academic sources. We have developed a session aimed at teaching staff on using AI and generative AI to find reliable information sources. And last but not least, we are developing an AI and generative AI training day for library staff, which is going to happen in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, so that kind of completes our presentation, but just wanted to leave you with some acknowledgements for our colleagues within the institution, within the library, who kind of contributed to this guide. It wasn't all just us two. There were lots of people involved. So I think we're going to go to the next session now, yeah, it's time for questions, hopefully at the end.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Oliver and Katerina. That's great. So we're going to hand over next to Jacqueline Vigilante from the University of Liverpool and her paper, Making Space, Setting Up an IT Community of Practice for Library Staff. Thank you.
Brilliant. Hopefully you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. As Nikki said, my name is Jacqueline Vigilante. I'm a Research Data Services Manager at the University of Liverpool. And I'm going to be doing something a little different from the previous two talks. I'm going to be telling a story about setting up an IT community of practice for library staff. So I won't be talking about AI specifically, but we'll be considering it as part of a wider information technologies ecosystem of skills and knowledge librarians are engaging with. It might be useful to know that this work was begun at a previous institution, but is entirely separate from any institution I am working for. It's something that I am personally interested in, and as I hope this presentation can show. It's ongoing work, and as you will see, the changes and development that it is taking. I'd also like to add that the community of practice was not the result of my work alone, but was supported, developed, and shaped by several other colleagues, one of whom I asked to present with me but was unable. So therefore, I'm going to present my experience and my perspective. So let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, I really wanted to learn how to code. Why? I'm not really sure. I didn't have any career plans for it, but it seemed like the thing to do because other colleagues were doing it. And I did like learning new things, and coding seemed like something I would enjoy. But I wasn't sure which language to pick. I did settle on Python because it seemed the one that I heard about the most, and there were lots of good resources out there that I could use. But I quickly learned that it was really hard. I got overwhelmed and lost momentum. My motivation for learning it petered out, and I decided to leave it to more tech-savvy librarians. It was some years later, in my role as Research Data Manager, that I was asked to provide training for some researchers around best practice in managing code and software. Now, code is data, and data was my job, so I started exploring the open source tools and softwares these academics were using. And I found that it once again sparked my interest in various areas and various tools. And soon I realized that I was able to understand the theory of how to document, share, or apply FAIR principles to code, but I felt I needed a practical understanding of how this was done. Fortunately, I stumbled upon many more training resources and open examples of applications that further sparked my curiosity and gave me further momentum to continue. And so I was able to progress a bit further in my knowledge and ability in some of these tools than I had done previously. But I was still running into the same barriers as before. First and foremost, this seemed to be a pressure to upskill. I felt like I needed to learn every IT software and tool or application that was out there if I was ever going to progress and work in the profession. Initially, this was the need to support academics using these tools and understand the landscape. But I also saw colleagues at other institutions applying these tools to their work, and I felt I needed to do the same. It was clear that the landscape was changing and I needed to go with it. But that didn't do anything for the steep learning curve that I had to grapple with. And this could be really discouraging. Not only were there new vocabularies to learn, but foreign concepts for a non-tech savvy librarian to handle. I was able to make a little progress and feel on top of the world, but then I would hit a brick wall trying to troubleshoot something, not knowing how small or large it was until I somehow managed to solve it. But then I would immediately hit the brick wall again with a new concept or with a new aspect. And it was hard to keep up the pace when troubleshooting could take anywhere from an hour to weeks to solve. And this time requirement did not fit in with the reality of my daily work. The tools and software took a lot of time to learn, more than I had to spend on them. For me, it was not possible to work with them every day, and after many days, I might need to go over it again to remind myself what I had already done. If I had the energy and the time among all my other priorities to spend an evening or part of the weekend to work on a project, it was simply not consistent enough. And I did begin to think, wasn't this for work? Shouldn't it be a priority or part of my day-to-day role? Except I already had a full load. And there was another thing. I wasn't always clear what the direct relevance to my work was. And this perceived lack of practical application was something that I saw as foundational to learning what I wanted. Part of the reason was that not knowing what was possible with a specific tool or software meant that it was hard to see how it could be used in my own work. And sometimes I felt work with these tools lay outside my role description. Or in some cases, there was an understanding that the application lay with another professional service or another role in the library. So it felt that it was, I had to put aside work that I needed to prioritize in order to learn this new skill if I was going to be using it for my job. And this, of course, would need to be justified. But one thing was different now with this new sort of momentum and curiosity that I had, and it was that I'd begun talking to colleagues. And it was this that made me realize most of what I was experiencing was normal. Despite us all having different interests in different tools or different skills and being at different stages of our learning, my colleagues were dealing with very similar issues. And it was through talking that I gathered information on what was of interest to library colleagues, what their needs were, and what type of support they would find most useful. And talk also generated more ideas, as well as becoming a way of supporting each other. I wanted to get started doing something quite practical, moving beyond talking, so I brainstormed various options and decided to hold a training session to demystify a common tool for anyone in the library, regardless of their role, so long as they were interested. I took this proposal to my line manager, who was very positive, and the result was an academic-led training session for library staff on using Git and GitHub and how they might understand those tools. This led to raise awareness among library staff, but it also led to further expressed interest in different tools or different software and other ways of approaching this. So through more talk with interested colleagues, we arranged 2 further training sessions, and these both were run by library staff. The first one was on Python, which introduced concepts and useful associated tools and provided practical exercises that we could work on together. The second one was another staff-led training session, more of an informal discussion about using APIs and how we might apply them to our work in the library. And through all of this, a community of practice began to form. And it was understood that this was a safe space where colleagues could raise questions or ask each other for help in various areas. And from this, I perceived that individuals felt motivated to pursue their own interests and applications outside of the group. I did set up a Teams channel where people could post resources or ask questions, but much of the support amongst our group remained informal. And now that I've changed roles and moved out of this so-called space, I'm aware that the community of practice is taking on a new form, but this is okay. A few things I've learned is that one size does not fit all. Different learning approaches work better for different people. Everyone has different ways of learning. They have different motivations. They have different time to dedicate. And your way is okay. A community of practice does not need to be everything for everyone. And on reflection, the time I spent getting to where I am now is actually good. Taking time is more useful than rushing. It allows for reflection and deeper learning. And rest is a part of this. It's necessary for maintaining motivation in the learning process so that one didn't burn out. Too much rest could feel detrimental, but at times I came back to a piece of work and found that I was much better placed to handle it. And another thing I learned was that there was no getting there. There were modules and courses one could take, but learning was continual and required different approaches in different circumstances. And it's okay not to know everything. I eventually picked it up, mostly by asking. I got really good at asking anyone and everyone. I got good at voicing my thoughts to colleagues. I got good at navigating Stack Overflow. I got good at contacting experts. And I will continue to do this. I'm not sure where the community of practice will go next or how it will form, but any support group needs to be fit for purpose and for those it supports. So change is good. What I can say is that for what it was, the community of practice was encouraging and gave me a good place to think about how librarians can better develop their skills in these areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That's great. Can people join your community of practice?
It's not very formal at the moment. I'm trying to decide how it's going to sort of begin rethinking. One of the sort of prompts for it was I know a lot of institutions have code clubs or other types of clubs, and I just noticed that there wasn't one for library staff.